They thought 70 deaths would break us. They lined our people against the white stone walls of the plaza, beneath the cold banners of the Galactic Empire, and they executed them in flawless formation, beams of plasma slicing through fragile bodies as though humanity were no more than parchment to be burned. The broadcast reached every corner of the galaxy. An eternal warning, the Empire declared. A silence followed, heavy and expectant, as if the stars themselves paused to see humanity collapse. And then a voice, cracked with grief but laced with insolent humor, rose from the crowd. Well, at least they didn't make us watch another season of reality TV. The silence broke. Humans laughed. Broken, bitter, incredulous laughter, sharp as shattered glass. The Empire's officials didn't understand. They rarely did. To them, grief was meant to be silent. But to us, laughter was the language of pain, the weapon of those too stubborn to surrender. Captain Elias Veyne was there that day, though few noticed him in the crowd. He carried scars like maps across his body, each etched line a history of survival. His younger brother, Garan, stood among the 70. When the rifles fired, Garen's chest blossomed with light, and Elias did not cry. He smiled, hollow and dangerous, a smile that would carry across the galaxy like a contagion. Watching from a higher terrace, stylus poised above her crystal tablet, was Lyrian Velzer, imperial chronicler, sworn to preserve truth in service of the throne. She had recorded countless subjugations, but none unsettled her like this. She wrote her first observation in careful script. Humans do not die quietly. They laugh when broken. It is disconcerting. In the days that followed, whispers bloomed across the colonies. 70 dead, but something older than fear rose in their place. A name passed from tongue to tongue, Boogeyman. The Empire dismissed it as human superstition. The other species mocked it. But humans, they believed, fiercely, desperately. In the markets of fringe stations, children carved crude masks. In the dim light of taverns, drunkards swore the Boogeyman had already struck. Elias vanished from public eyes. Rumor became shadow, and shadow took shape. In the jungles of Calvarus IV, among ruins entwined with roots thicker than towers, he fashioned himself into the nightmare they whispered of. A ghillie suit stitched with moss and wire. A skeletal mask scavenged from a battlefield. An ancient projectile rifle, loud, crude, utterly terrifying. The first Imperial patrol disappeared without a trace. Only static remained, and in the static a voice whispered, "Sleep with one eye open." The second patrol stumbled upon their comrades, strung upside down in vines, armor polished, weapons gone. A message etched in the dirt read simply, "The Boogeyman doesn't sleep." Panic slithered through the Empire's ranks. Lyrian, compelled by duty or perhaps fascination, followed these incidents closely. She interviewed shaken survivors and scribbled feverishly in her records. One soldier swears the figure moved like a ghost, not bound by logic. Another insists he heard laughter, low and guttural, in the trees. I am ordered to dismiss these accounts as hysteria. Yet hysteria spreads. Elias gathered strays, miners, farmers, deserters, all too stubborn to lie down and die. He spoke rarely, but when he did, each word cut deep. "We're not here for glory," he told them by firelight. "We're here because they think we can be erased with spectacle. Let's give them a show worth remembering." They duct-taped rifles when the parts broke, joked about cold microwave burritos while crouching in mud, and drew cartoons of the Emperor with a cat on his head. Madness, the Empire called it. Morale, Elias called it. One young recruit asked him once, "What if they kill you too? What happens to the Boogeyman then?" Elias smirked beneath his mask. "Then tell them I'll be back." Like one of those old Earth movies. Sequels always happen. The boy laughed until tears streaked his face. That was humanity's secret. Our laughter was never far from our grief. The Empire answered with fury. Dropships descended, soldiers flooded the ruins, firestorms razed the jungles. For every trap sprung, Elias and his band lost 2 comrades. Yet the myth only grew. Markets buzzed with gossip. Tavern walls bore fresh graffiti. He referenced something called Chuck Norris and winked. "We are unsure who this is, but we are deeply afraid." Then came betrayal. One sympathizer sold their camp's coordinates for a fistful of credits. The night erupted in fire. Drones shrieked overhead, plasma-seared flesh, the air thickened with smoke. Elias staggered through chaos, dragging wounded rebels toward the trees. A beam cut across his side, burning through armor and skin. For a moment, he faltered, his body betraying him, the mask slipping from his face. And then a child pressed something into his arms. A cat, its fur singed, eyes luminous in the firelight. "Don't let them take this too," she whispered. The cat meowed indignantly, clawing his arm as if to remind him that life, even absurd life, demanded protection. Elias laughed, a deep, cracked sound, and the boogeyman rose again, firing into the night, every bullet thunderous against the silence the Empire had tried to impose. By dawn, half his rebels were gone. Graves were dug in the charred earth. They buried comrades with bare hands, planting flowers scavenged from the forest beside the mounds. Elias said nothing. His silence was heavier than grief. Yet when the survivors looked at him, they saw not despair but endurance. That same morning, 3 systems away, fresh graffiti appeared on walls and shuttle bays. "The boogeyman doesn't sleep. Neither do we." The legend outpaced the man, spreading faster than the Empire could kill. Lyrian wrote her most dangerous words yet. I was commanded to record their ending. Instead, I find myself chronicling the birth of a legend. Empires fall into silence, but humans end with song. So remember this, wanderer. 70 graves were carved that day, but from those graves rose 1,000 stories. The Empire thought it executed our defiance. Instead, it fed it. Laughter is a strange seed, mocked, dismissed, but it grows in places even fire cannot reach. And sometimes, laughter grows teeth. They say fear spreads faster than fire. On Calvar's IV, the jungles still smoldered from the Empire's purge, but the smoke carried something stronger than ash. It carried a name, whispered in taverns, painted on walls, passed between trembling lips, the boogeyman. Soldiers searched shadows and heard footsteps where there were none. Commanders cursed at reports that patrols refused to march at night. An empire of 1,000 worlds was trembling, not at fleets or armies, but at a myth wrapped in moss and bone. Captain Elias Veyne was no longer a man in the eyes of his people. He had become rumor given form, grief sharpened into a blade. Yet alone, when the mask was off and the firelight flickered across his scarred face, he knew the truth. He was tired, wounded, bleeding more each day. The legend might not sleep, but the man beneath it longed to. Across the stars, Lyrian Velzer wrote in secret, her official reports clean and sterile, while her private notes burned with quiet heresy. The boogeyman is one man, perhaps. Yet he has become every human. He is laughter in the trenches, sarcasm before the noose. The Empire believes it fights a soldier. It does not see it fights a species that refuses to vanish. The Empire saw only infection that needed cutting out. Armadas assembled, entire regiments dispatched to human colonies. They called it pacification. To humans, it was starvation, bombardment, and broken walls. Towns burned, but even in ashes, someone always scrawled the same phrase. The boogeyman doesn't sleep. In the rebel camp, supplies dwindled. Elias stood over a crate of spoiled rations, shaking his head. Empire thinks they can starve us out, he muttered. Clearly, they've never seen a man survive 3 weeks on cold burritos and stale beer. His soldiers laughed, though the laughter was thin, brittle. A few of them had begun to doubt, whispering that one man could not stand against fleets. One evening, as the rebels tended wounds and sharpened knives, Lyrian appeared at the edge of the firelight. She had traveled in disguise, cloak pulled tight, risking everything to cross enemy lines. Eyes widened, weapons raised, but Elias lifted a hand. Let her speak. Her voice trembled, yet her words were steady. The Empire knows where you are. Tomorrow, they will strike with 5 regiments. You will not survive. She paused, gaze softening. But I would not see you end as a footnote. There is a way, if you move now. Silence weighed heavy. The rebels shifted uneasily, mistrust thick in the air. Elias studied her, eyes unreadable behind a mask. Why warn us? Lyrian lowered her head. Because I came to record your extinction, and I have found instead that you are teaching me how to live. No one spoke for a moment. Then one soldier muttered, she's with him. And just like that, the chronicler of their doom became the chronicler of their defiance. They marched through the night, weaving through ruins slick with moss, guided by Lyrian's knowledge of imperial strategy. By dawn, they reached an abandoned city, its towers hollowed and crumbling. It would be their battlefield. The Empire arrived in thunder and fire. Dropships screamed through the sky, regiments poured into streets, drones hovered like swarms of steel insects. Elias positioned his ragged fighters among the ruins, duct-taped rifles glinting in the shadows. Traps hidden in crumbled stairwells, explosive charges buried beneath tiles, cats herded into drone corridors, their meows echoing like war horns. The first wave came with disciplined precision. The rebels met them with chaos. Traps detonated, staircases collapsed. Cats leapt onto drones and sent them spinning. Laughter crackled over comms. We thought Floor Man was a myth. He is not. The second wave pressed harder, plasma searing the walls, drones adapting to chaos. Rebels fell one by one, cries swallowed by smoke. Elias charged into the thick of it, rifle roaring, every shot deafening. The mass grinned even as his side bled anew. At the heart of the battle, Elias faced an Imperial commander, armored and bristling with weaponry. They clashed in the ruins of a once great hall, plasma against steel, strength against sheer human fury. The commander sneered through his visor. You cannot kill an empire with duct tape and folklore. Elias drove a bayonet through his chest. Watch me. But victory was costly. The city burned around them, bodies littered the streets. Half the rebels were gone, and Elias collapsed, blood soaking his side. For a breathless moment, the legend seemed mortal again. Then the comms flared. His voice, ragged but unbroken, carried across channels hacked into the Empire's own networks. You thought I was one man. You thought wrong. The Boogeyman doesn't sleep, and neither does humanity. Across colonies, the words ignited sparks. Farmers took up arms. Miners detonated charges beneath supply convoys. Prisoners broke chains and struck their guards. For every rebel who fell, 10 more rose, not because they saw Elias, but because they believed in what he had become. The Empire realized too late that myths cannot be executed. Soldiers whispered in terror that they fought not against men, but against shadows. Generals cursed the name as it spread beyond their reach. The Boogeyman had multiplied. When the smoke settled, Lyrian knelt beside Elias, pressing cloth to his wound. Her hands trembled, but her gaze was steady. You cannot keep this up, she whispered. His lips cracked into a grin. Sure I can. Haven't even run out of duct tape yet. She almost laughed, almost cried. In that fragile space, they shared something wordless, a bond forged not in declarations, but in survival, in the quiet defiance of tending wounds in a world that wanted them both erased. That night, the survivors lit no fire for fear of detection. They sat in silence among the ruins, stars glimmering faintly above. Lyrian looked at Elias, battered yet unbroken, and wrote her final note of the day. I was ordered to record humanity's end. Instead, I have seen the birth of their eternity. The Empire fights armies. Humanity fights with stories. And stories do not die. So remember this, reader. Empires measure strength in fleets and regiments, but humanity measures it in persistence. The Boogeyman is not one man in a mask, but the refusal of a people to vanish. They may burn our homes, starve our bodies, and bury our dead. But laughter, stubborn and unyielding, grows like vines through the cracks of ruin. And sometimes, when tended by grief and watered by rage, those vines choke empires. Empires do not collapse in a roar. They collapse in whispers, in laughter echoing where silence was expected, in stories that outlive the soldiers sent to erase them. The Galactic Empire had crushed worlds with fleets, executed rebels by the thousands. And yet, when historians look back, they will speak not of its battleships, but of a rumor, the Boogeyman. On the edges of the galaxy, Elias Veyne stirred awake in a medic's tent, his body broken, but his legend burning brighter than ever. The battle for the ruined city had scarred him deeply, his ribs fractured, his side torn open, but outside, across colonies and stations, the whisper had become thunder. Farmers with rusted rifles, miners wielding drills, prisoners tearing chains from walls, all rose in answer to his words. The Boogeyman doesn't sleep, and neither do we. The Empire had grown desperate. No longer content with attrition, they declared a final campaign. They called it Operation Silence Eternal. Entire fleets massed near human worlds, their commanders vowing to extinguish the myth once and for all. What they failed to grasp was that myths are not extinguished by fire. They are fed by it. Elias stood among his rebels, scarred and skeletal beneath the mask, surveying the remnants of his people. Men and women starved but unyielding. Children carrying messages between safe houses. Old miners carving rifles out of scrap. "We're not soldiers," one grumbled, exhaustion heavy in his voice. "No," Elias said, voice like gravel. "We're worse. We're human." Lyrian Velzer stood at his side, chronicler no longer. Her stylus had been replaced by a stolen pistol, though her words still flowed in secret journals. She recorded the small things, the way Elias coughed blood but refused to sit, the way rebels painted skeletal masks on their helmets, the way cats prowled the camps as if they too had joined the cause. She had crossed a line she could never return from, but she did not regret it. The Empire's fleets arrived above Calvar's Four in storms of steel and fire. Dropships blackened the sky, their descent shaking the very bones of the ruins. The rebels looked up, fear etched into their faces. Elias pulled the mask over his scars, straightened despite the agony tearing through his body, and said, "Then let's give them a welcome party. Someone cue the theme music." They fought not with numbers, but with defiance. Streets collapsed under the weight of hidden charges. Water mains burst, flooding avenues where drones short-circuited and sparked. Rebels laughed over open comms, their voices carrying across the battlefield. Florida man strikes again. This one duct-taped his leg back together, still fighting. Confusion spread through Imperial ranks. Fear cracked discipline. At the heart of the storm, Elias led from the front, his rifle thundering, his mask grinning. Plasma burned across his armor, drones swarmed overhead, and still he rose again and again. Each time he fell, a hand pulled him up. Lyrians, rebels, sometimes even a stranger who had come to fight for nothing but the myth. The Empire's commander, Admiral Serix, descended personally, clad in armor like a walking fortress. He confronted Elias in the shattered square where Garan had once died. "You are flesh and bone. I am steel. Today the Boogeyman dies." Elias staggered, but raised his weapon. "Funny thing about us humans," he rasped. "We don't stay buried." They clashed, Elias darting through rubble, Serix hammering down with overwhelming force. Blade scraped, plasma seared stone. Laughter crackled across human comms, even as bodies fell around them. Elias fought with fury, but exhaustion weighed him down. The Admiral struck him hard, sending him crashing to the ground. The mask cracked. Blood smeared his face. For a moment, silence fell. And then, before Serix could strike the final blow, voices erupted across every channel, every frequency, every stolen comm, not one voice, but thousands. Miners, farmers, soldiers, prisoners. "The Boogeyman doesn't sleep," shouted one. "Neither do we," shouted another. The phrase cascaded like wildfire, repeated by countless throats across systems, echoing even in alien markets and taverns. Serix hesitated, unnerved, his visor reflecting the glow of 1,000 torches lit in defiance across the city. Elias rose, broken but unyielding, and drove his bayonet into the Admiral's chest. "Welcome to the nightmare," he whispered, twisting the blade. Serix fell, and with him, the Empire's last claim to invincibility. The battle did not end in triumph, but in exhaustion. The fleets withdrew, too battered to continue. The Empire had the numbers still, the weapons still, but they no longer had belief. The myth had grown larger than fear, larger than their power to contain. Across the galaxy, other species looked upon humans with new eyes, not as broken rebels, but as a force that would not die. In the aftermath, rebels buried their dead. Graves lined the ruins, flowers planted above them, cats weaving silently between stones. Elias sat apart, the mask resting on his lap, his body trembling with every breath. Lyrian knelt beside him, binding his wounds with careful hands. "You cannot keep this up," she said softly. His laugh was cracked, painful but alive. "No, but someone else will. That's the point." He was right. Already, new leaders were rising, new masks being carved, new voices echoing the words he had made eternal. Elias was no longer alone. Humanity had become the Boogeyman. Lyrian set aside her stylus one last time. Her chronicles were no longer reports for the throne. They were stories for the future. She wrote, "I came to record extinction. Instead, I have recorded defiance. The Boogeyman is not a man, but a mirror. In it, every human sees their own refusal to vanish. Empires fade, legends endure. And you, reader, yes, you who carry this memory now, remember, 70 graves once opened the story, but from those graves bloomed a forest of defiance. Humanity is not strongest in fleets or weapons. Humanity is strongest in its stubborn, laughing refusal to lie down when told to. Empires burn out, myths burn forever, and somewhere in the ruins of 1,000 battlefields, laughter still echoes in the dark, because the Boogeyman doesn't sleep.